Okay. Step 0. Step 0 is about as much fun as eating 20 bars of chocolate and 15 boiled eggs at Easter and then trying to go to the toilet. Step 0 is about as inspirational as going to the dentist for a root canal followed by 3 fillings with no injection. Step 0 is the acquisition campaign and is probably one of the most miserably, painfully tough areas of the sales process that there is. But I'll give you some good news. There is no good news. Step 0 is cold calling. Step 0 is trying to find new opportunity from completely new places. Step 0 is acquisition campaigning. Step 0 is getting on the phone. And do you want to know something that's interesting? In sales, you've got 3 different types of people. Type number 1 is the person who hates step 0 and doesn't do it. Type number 2 is the person who hates step 0 and does do it. And type number 3 is the person who loves doing cold calls. And I've not met many the type number 3, but they do exist, and they're a bit weird, sadomasochistic types. But the majority of people fall into number 1. They don't like it and they don't do it. It's actually very rare to find the people of the second type, people who do it. It's difficult to find people who do it. I've been telling organizations for a long time about one piece of research that I heard. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't really care, but I believe it. And they said that 98% of all organizations, regardless where they come from, do not have a structured way of approaching this job of finding new customers to sell to. Yeah, 98%. And from the 2% who said we have a structured process for cold calling and acquisition campaigning, they believed that 50% of those 2% were, in fact, lying. Anyway, let's get a little bit more positive about this. Acquisition campaigns, and acquisition campaigning are, to my knowledge, the best way of dealing with this reality. The pipeline has to begin somewhere. Every new opportunity, every new project begins with a cold call. Maybe it was on the phone, but it probably wasn't. Maybe it was in a corridor somewhere, walking down the corridor, meeting some guy who you've never met before. You've been introduced, you put the question, hey, could I come and speak to you about something? That's a cold call as well. And every piece of opportunity on the planet begins at some stage with a cold call, unless it's purely customer driven, and even then it's arguable that the first flash of inspiration or interest must come from somewhere. Cold calling works, or not cold calling, I don't mean especially on the telephone, but this process of going to market, of getting and putting yourself in a situation where you're speaking to people that you've not spoken to before about your products and services, about your experience, about your success. This does work. But it is the pipeline. It's subject to the same rules of the pipeline, just as everything else in the same process. You have to do enough of it for something to stick. So it really is a numbers game. You've got to do a lot of acquisition campaigning activity to guarantee any level of opportunity at the end. But the companies who do it and do it well will be more successful in finding new opportunity than the companies who just kind of don't do it at all. And what is normal is that a sales organization will say to its sales reps, you have to do a certain amount of acquisition work in the course of your job profile. But this will always be written in such a way, or it will always be practiced in such a way that the sales reps themselves, they don't actually have to do anything. Or when asked, they will say, oh yes, we do some. And if they're pushed, then they'll say, oh yes, I do at least 2 or 3 or 4 calls a week. Some people will say I do at least 10 or 20 calls a week, and that's great. but the personal motivation behind it is extremely difficult. It is difficult to motivate yourself to get on the phone and do the calls. It's just difficult to find this constant self-motivation to do that. So the acquisition campaign is an organizational tool that makes this job easy. Yeah? Or it doesn't make it easy, because the job itself will never be easy, but it takes the pain away from acquisition campaigning. It makes the job manageable. It creates a team of people who are going to do it, rather than leaving it to the self-motivation of one person. It gives this a time so that this activity happens within a certain time frame, and then this group of people can leave it again for a month or 2 months or 3 months or 4 months or however long they like. And it shows the organization that acquisition campaigning can in itself be a very useful way to define value for the organization of their products and services, to train up new sales reps, and to really put the ownership of acquisition activity onto the salespeople and the sales organization, and not leave it up to any third-party type of call agencies or anything like that. However, a word of warning or a word of reality, in some places in Western Europe, cold calling is becoming illegal. You're not even allowed to pick up the phone. You can't call without knowing somebody's name, extension, etc. You have to know the person before you can call them, which obviously makes cold calling extremely difficult. So the future of acquisition campaigning will not exactly change, but the first level of it will be replaced by some kind of event, trade fair, exhibition, road show type event, where the face-to-face customer contact is established before moving into the call itself. Okay? Acquisition campaigning.